The Freedom Towers is a movement against the monopoly over data. Built by communities everywhere, together the towers host thousands of radio stations, forming an alternative communication network.
They said it came from a resurgence of pirate radio stations across the city. Those towering antennas suspending above rooftops had rewired airspace into common grounds against a reality increasingly controlled by data analysis.
They reminded me of Radio Caroline and their devoted listeners tuning in late at night, escaping into experimental music and eclectic stories unheard of anywhere else. We used to hack those cheap, low-tech radios so you could broadcast from home. We gave them out to the community, and that was the beginning of our small movement against an increasingly worrying and centralized filter of thoughts and information.
The city was daunting at night, but even when I was alone, I found my belonging in the sounds and conversations of familiar strangers. From a distance, I felt a part of them. The tower gave the most marginalized a direct voice and a relatable one. In those days, our voices were often buried under algorithms influenced by popular media and trending biases.
Before the towers, we never spoke directly. Every message I sent was relayed across the ocean through multiple servers, transmitters, and back again. Our world was synchronized with more than 400 privately owned submarine cables. Tesla owned the sky with 40,000 satellites, and billions of personal devices from Apple were plugged into and around us. They knew how we feel, why we feel, and the collapse of organism into algorithms was celebrated. I mean, who would want to live a life of unfulfilled potential?
Yet it soon became increasingly clear. We were the products. Our behavior monetized by monopoly over our data, generating economies and power larger than any international regulatory bodies. For years, AWS profited by anonymizing data from 5,000 governmental organizations and sold them to third-party advertisers. Data breaches were prevalent, but we didn't have a choice. Today, all that seems so unimaginable.
There's a beach in Cornwall where I grew up, and on a clear day you could see the NSA transceivers along the cliffs, where the majority of the world's submarine internet cables converged. Governments depended on big tech's infrastructural bottlenecks to conduct mass surveillance. We knew it all along, but it wasn't until they tried to integrate Google into the city that we fought back. Walking through a public square should never constitute consent for private surveillance analysis. If urbanization had folded into data optimization, the monopolies would have been immortalized as gods.
With thousands of radio towers distributed throughout the city, the project reimagines the increasingly centralized infrastructure of the internet as an expanding network of finely tuned, decentralized communication towers, each connecting its own community.
Look at 0G, sir. Roger.
1719 I'm sitting in a room for London, shaped like Le Roi des Belges.
I think that one of the great things about the internet in the first era was the fact that it was sort of community governed and controlled. It's a system by which many computers come together to create kind of a new kind of meta computer.
They were known as Autonomia, a workers' revolution in the 60s that used free radio stations as a platform for public demonstration. Broadcasting was their way to subvert state monopolies and centralize mass media. They gave rise to a generation of pirate radio stations and the movement of spontaneous broadcasting to share live performances, protests, and distributed internet service to underserved communities. Some pirate radio stations later developed into a network of local stations that were community governed and controlled.
The towers were first constructed above the roofs of 15 central London telephone exchange buildings, and from there more expanded towards smaller neighbourhoods. These exchanges were used to hold an expansive landline infrastructure that supported the majority of the city's broadband internet, but were all due to be phased out and moved to the city's periphery.
I have kept a portion of the archive when they finally closed BT. Mostly photos, many of them documented the exchange's history of being continuously added to, removed, and combined in line with the movement and development of the local communities. The adaptability of the tower to expanding communal programs was tested with a tethering structure in our early iterations. The tower itself serves as an antenna for community radio transmission, but also to communicate with towers across the city, creating a mesh network that can relay data across a wider area.
In Broadfields, I saw the first glimpse of a communication network powered by community radio. The antenna, tethered into a tower, became the host to the neighborhood. The radio was platform for commerce, networking, and entertainment, all localized to the scale of the community.
And that was Sarah from Blackwell. This is BFM only in Broadfield. Good morning, this is BFM. And first off, a reminder, we are hosting the Broadfields Goods Exchange in the floating boxes downstairs. You can broadcast in or call in to the studio, and of course, everyone is welcome.
A lot of people say legendary quite a lot, but this is like legendary.
And from the kiosk inside his observatory, astronomer Dr. Ian Hollingworth gives us his review of legendary movies today at 1 o'clock. Dr. Hollingworth is also hosting Community Movie Night this week on Friday, followed by Madame McClear's weekly broadcast from her bathroom, Skin Deep.
Hi, I'll be with you in a minute. Are you feeling comfortable? Great.
I had to tell somebody so I could cleanse my soul. So I did just that. I told 2 friends, exclusively 2 friends, no one else ever has to find out about this. And I felt so much better ever since, now that someone else has seen my dirty laundry.
And at midnight, join Harry from the Nocturnal Laundromat, where we air our secrets. And a soundbite from our interview with Marcus, the grocer who also runs the community garden by the Abbey. The market is on every weekend. They support this radio, so please go support them.
I try to select a special a vegetable or fruit, unusual, the real absinthe, yes, that nobody wants to eat because it's everybody is so afraid to be mad.
Finally, the link to the full interview will be sent over 92.5. This is your daily briefing from BFM.
In an increasingly data-reliant world, the tower served to decentralize data infrastructure and subvert corporate monopolies through an open-source, easily accessible radio network. If the way we communicate shape our communities, can we build a more equitable community in radio space?